Hey everyone, today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 female-led superhero movies. Now, my full list on Letterboxd actually has 13 movies, and I'll put them up on screen now. Have fun guessing which 3 won't make the cut. Couple things before we start. First, I apologize in advance if I butcher anyone's names. A couple of these movies are foreign language films, and I'm probably going to say some names wrong. And secondly, spoiler alert. Starting off, my number 10 is Dark Phoenix. This is the best adaptation of the Dark Phoenix saga we've gotten so far, and that's not saying much. Aside from Jennifer Lawrence, who is clearly phoning it in, the rest of the acting ranges from decent to fantastic. Sophie Turner's American accent is improving, James McAvoy is very good as usual, Nicholas Hoult, Ty Sheridan, and Cody Smith-McPhee are all good, and Michael Fassbender is fantastic. When Eric finds out that Raven is dead, you can see the anguish in his eyes. You can see the pain. This movie has a very good blend of practical and digital effects. The car crash is mostly practical.
Dude, what are you...
I don't know. It's not me.
The helicopter crash is also mostly practical. The action is pretty good overall. The fight with Jean outside of her house is short but well done. The skirmish between the X-Men and the Brotherhood is pretty fun. The final fight on the train is very good. The scene where Jean makes Charles walk up the stairs is genuinely great and uncomfortable to watch in the best way possible. The villains, on the other hand, are just kind of meh. Jessica Chastain is trying, but she's not given a lot to work with. Like I said earlier, Jennifer Lawrence is definitely phoning it in. This movie makes the same mistake as The Last Stand, which is trying to cram the Phoenix saga into one movie. I haven't read the comics, but based on what I know, they need at least 2 movies to tell it properly. Or, maybe a miniseries, I don't know. Simon Kinberg serves as both writer and director, and even with 3 other writers, a lot of the dialogue is very generic and predictable. This movie's next decade time jump is even more pointless and nonsensical than the one in Apocalypse. It's basically just an excuse to have a semi-legit reason for the X-Men to be in space, but they could have kept it set in the 80s and still found a real-life event that could lead them up into space. Now they're all 10 years older but still look the same. Again.
These timelines are so confusing.
Yeah, what he said. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Next up, coming to us from Indonesia, my number 9 is Valentine, also known as Valentine the Dark Avenger. This movie's plot is fairly generic. The VFX range from pretty convincing to laughably bad. However, it's elevated by a strong cast and some solid action. Estelle Linden is very good in the lead role, and the rest of the cast is at least decent. For all this movie's faults, it does do a pretty good job of deconstructing how hard it can be to be a superhero. Now, this isn't the first movie to do that. Kick-Ass comes to mind. But it's not the same as Kick-Ass. It doesn't do the exact same thing Kick-Ass did. It just has some similar aspects. My score is 3 out of 5. Number 8 is Wonder Woman 1984. This movie is shamelessly bonkers, infectiously joyful, and painfully relevant in this day and age. It's also kind of tone-deaf. Gal Gadot is delightful as Wonder Woman. Her acting still isn't great, but she's getting better at emoting, so that's something. Chris Pine is awesome as usual. Pedro Pascal is great, and Kristen Wiig is good. The pacing is good, the action is good, and Hans Zimmer's musical score is very good. Where this movie improves on the first one is with the villains and the third act. Cheetah isn't great, but she's decently fleshed out, fairly well developed, and kind of relatable. And Kristen Wiig shows that her dramatic acting is on par with her comedic stuff. Unfortunately, Cheetah also kind of feels like a missed opportunity because a lot of what we know about her comes from the way people react to her rather than the things that she does. So we don't know as much about her as the movie wants us to think we do. But it's no worse than the villains from the first movie, so I'll take it. Maxwell Lord is a more sympathetic villain, actually, just for different reasons. They don't do a great job of fleshing this out until later in the film, but they do make it clear that he's not evil, he's just easily corruptible. And also, the third act actually feels like a natural conclusion of the story rather than, well, what we got in the first movie. Now, yeah, the final fight isn't great, but plot-wise, it's much better than the final fight from Wonder Woman. Unfortunately, this movie suffers from what is known as a broken Aesop. Maxwell Lord seems to be an indictment of 80s consumerism and capitalism as a whole, but the rest of the movie goes out of its way to glorify 80s fashion trends, ritzy apartments and office spaces, fancy cars, and shopping malls, i.e. representations of those very things. Also, for all Diana's talk about how she's given up so much for the world and wants one thing in return, she has an enormous condo, tastefully decorated, with a gorgeous view overlooking the Potomac, i.e. the exact sort of space someone like Lord might covet. Diana may not covet more than Lord does, but she still indulges quite a bit. The score is 3.4 out of 5. Number 7 is Tank Girl. The character of Tank Girl feels like a proto-Harley Quinn, and I mean that in the best way possible. Rachel Talalay is someone whose work I'm not super familiar with, but she's clearly a talented director despite being the one who gave us the worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie. The acting is solid, although most of the cast are playing two-dimensional characters and don't really get a lot of development. Naomi Watts' Jet Girl is the only one who gets any sort of arc, and it is a pretty satisfying one. Watts, Lori Petty, and Malcolm McDowell are all great, and Jeff Kober, Reggie, Kathy, and Ice-T are all good.
So, like, what are your names?
Give me the gas.
And like, what are you doing here?
Is it true what they say about guys with big shoes?
Yeah? He asked you a question, answer it!
Hey, I have 2 words for you. Brush your teeth!
They're spies. They got water and power logos all over them.
Yeah, I was thinking that, right? But then I was also thinking that they are water and power.
No, don't.
Why would they come here advertising it?
Check it out. Tattoos. Wonder where else they got them.
I don't think those are tattoos. I mean, like, who would want some alphabet soup? I'd rather have a dragon or something more Aquarian related, you dig?
Her prisoner stamps.
Prisoner my ass. That's exactly what they want us to think.
Or better yet, that isn't what they want us to think. That way, we'll think what they think we might think, but actually...
Booger.
Huh?
Try not to speak. How much did they pay you to spy on us?
$2.15.
Shut up.
The practical effects and the makeup are very well done, and the action is pretty good too. And for those of you who saw this movie as a kid but haven't seen it since, Tank Girl definitely fucked that kangaroo. My score is 3.5 out of 5. Number 6 is Black Widow. This isn't a top-tier Marvel film, but it is a fun and emotionally charged superhero flick. It was also about 4 to 5 years too late, so there's that. The opening credits sequence is pretty great.
It's fun to lose and to pretend she's overboard and selfish.
Remove all the defense.
Oh no, I know a dirty word.
That one and her.
It's hard to have high stakes in a prequel because there are certain characters you know are going to survive, which is why it's important to introduce new characters and make the audience care about them so that you can, put them at risk and have the audience care. Thankfully, the film succeeds in this regard. Scarlett Johansson is solid as usual. Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Rachel Weisz are all great. The action is solid, the musical score is good, the emotional moments genuinely work, and Taskmaster is a pretty good villain despite the lack of comic accuracy. My score is 3.6 out of 5. Number 5 is Captain Marvel. Honestly, my only big problem with this movie is the plot. It's not bad per se, it's just generic. Brie Larson kills it as Carol Danvers. I know people like to complain that she was very bland and emotionless for at least the first part. Some people say the whole movie, but that's bullshit. Anyway, yes, she was, for part of it. That was deliberate. It's not like she can't act. She won an Oscar for her performance in The Room. She can act. The reason she's emotionless for the first part of the movie is because of her character. Carol has been raised by the Kree, who have taught her that emotion is weakness and must be suppressed. And even after she starts to reject that teaching, and pretty much all of their teachings, she still doesn't know who to trust, so she's keeping it close to the chest.
Congratulations to you, Star Force lady. You're under arrest. Rook! Rook, let's roll! Did you see her weapon?
I did not.
Anyway, the acting is solid across the board, but the biggest surprise came from Ben Mendelsohn. I've said this a lot before, but I'm going to say it every time I talk about this movie. Going back for at least the last few years, Ben Mendelsohn has kind of become typecast as the sleazy villain. Dark Knight Rises, Rogue One, Ready Player One, that shitty Robin Hood reboot. You get the idea. When he first popped up in this movie, naturally I assumed, oh, he's the bad guy. And the movie seems to have predicted that response from the audience, which is why they give you a bait and switch, and it turns out, oh no, he's not that bad. He's just a lighter shade of gray. So yeah, well done. My score is 4 out of 5. Number 4 is AntMan and the Wasp. Some MCU movies are integral to advancing the main overarching plot of the Infinity Saga. Others only play a small role and mostly just exist as self-contained entertainment. AntMan and the Wasp is the latter. Ghost is one of the most underrated villains in the MCU, definitely one of the most sympathetic. She's not evil, she's only a villain because her goals are in direct conflict with the hero's goals. And also, she's willing to go to greater lengths to achieve her goals than they are.
My father tried to continue his research on his own. Desperate to restore his name, so he took risks. Too many. Until something went wrong. He told us to run.
Guys, what's happening? Just go! Go!
I could tell he was scared. I didn't want him to be alone. When I woke up, my parents were dead. I wasn't so lucky. They call it molecular disequilibrium. A rather dull name, I think. Doesn't quite do justice to what it means. Every cell in my body is torn apart and stitched back together. Over and over, every day.
This movie also gives us a more straightforward villain in the form of Walton Goggins, so, you know, someone to hate. The humor is just as good as it was in the first movie, if not better. The story is character-driven and it works. And best of all, this movie gives us a positive portrayal of co-parenting and a divorced couple who aren't constantly at each other's throats, which is something not nearly enough movies do. My score is 4.1 out of 5. Number 3 is Wonder Woman. Gal Gadot isn't a great actor, but she is solid as Wonder Woman. She is absolutely delightful. Chris Pine is great, and Lucy Davis is absolutely hilarious. The action in this movie is fucking great. The slow motion they use is different enough from Zack Snyder's slow motion to stand apart. The cinematography is pretty great, and the choreography kicks ass. The humor in this movie is consistently funny, and unlike a lot of movies, the humor actually feels natural and not like it was injected into an already completed script. The musical score is one of the best in the DCEU. It borrows a little bit from Batman v Superman, understandably, but it also adds a bunch of new music and stands on its own overall. The villains are fine, I guess. I don't hate them, I don't love them, they're just fine. Like I've said before, my one big problem with this movie is the final battle. I don't hate it. It's not awful, it's not the worst thing ever, but it does feel kind of forced. Like, yes, from a psychological standpoint, it makes sense. It kind of feels like a natural conclusion, but in terms of plot, in terms of other aspects of character development, it just doesn't really mesh. My score is 4.5 out of 5. Number 2 is Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey. Much like the Suicide Squad, this movie is everything the 2016 Suicide Squad should have been. It's rated R, the tone is consistent, and most importantly, the stakes are relatable. That's one of my favorite things about this movie. The conflict isn't some deity trying to conquer, destroy, or colonize the world. It's Harley Quinn dumping the Joker, losing her social immunity in the process, and having to escape all these people who are trying to kill her while trying to figure out who she is and what she wants out of life. The casting is on point. Margot Robbie is fantastic as Harley. Journey Smollett-Bell and Rosie Perez are both very good. Ella J. Basco is surprisingly good in her debut role. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead absolutely steals the show. As for the villains, Ewan McGregor is wonderfully flamboyant and sinister. Chris Messina is very good as Victor Zsasz. Those two have very good chemistry, and they're clearly having a lot of fun playing off each other. There are some choreography issues with the final fight, but aside from that, the action is solid. It's well shot, the editing uses longer takes so that you can see what's going on, so you can see all the gory details. The humor is pretty consistently funny. Harley's Egg Sandwich is still a better love story than Twilight. I love that they lampshade the fact that Huntress is your basic anti-hero up for revenge, while also giving us a more realistic portrayal of that kind of character than we usually get. She has been raised as a warrior, not as a person. She doesn't have the best people skills. She doesn't have one-liners and quips ready to go on the spot. She has to practice them in the mirror several times, and even then it doesn't always work.
Dope. Oh, no, not that one. Sentimental value. Try this. You're kidding. What? Gotta take care of the girls. Isn't this fun? It's just like a sleepover. We should order pizza. Hey, Cosmos. Harley, focus. Okay, yeah.
Hey, nice. What the hell is up with this bow and arrow shit?
It's not a fucking bow and arrow, it's a crossbow. I'm not 12.
I love this chick. She's got rage issues.
I don't have rage issues!
You know, psychologically speaking, vengeance rarely brings the catharsis we hope for.
Yeah.
Are we ready? Bad guys, just outside.
There's also a solid running gag where Huntress is trying to make a name for herself, but people keep calling her the crossbow killer, and she does not like that. My score is 4.6 out of 5. Finally, coming to us from Norway, my number 1 is Thelma. I'm a straight man, but even I can appreciate the subtext this movie weaves into its story. It is a strange and wonderful tale of a sheltered young woman discovering both her sexuality and her superpowers, and having to come to terms with them both. It's basically an allegory for self-acceptance and being true to yourself. From a visual standpoint, this movie is gorgeous. It's well shot, well edited, the color palette is pleasant to look at. I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. Eli Harbo delivers a subtly powerful performance in the lead role. Kaya Wilkins is very good in her film debut. And Henrik Raphaelsen and Helen Dorrit Peterson are both solid. This movie fucking goes places. Thelma's powers are basically low-grade reality manipulation. If she wants something badly enough, it will happen. And that's scary, because when she starts to develop feelings for one of her classmates, and then that classmate starts to reciprocate those feelings, she has no way of knowing if that's actually real or if it's her powers making it happen. It kind of makes her one of the most sympathetic villain protagonists ever. My score is 4.7 out of 5. Hey everyone, what are your favorites? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe and all that. If you don't like the video, subscribe anyway and tell me why so I can get some feedback for these things, because I don't get a lot of it. That's all for now. Stay safe in these crazy times.